Immigration. It's been the defining characteristic of America since before our country even began. So it's important to remind ourselves of our rich history, of where we all came from to create this one-of-a-kind melting pot of people that is the United States in the 21st century. More than 4 decades of relatively little immigration into America after its founding, in the 1830s, tens of thousands of immigrants began arriving on her eastern shores, again mainly from Britain, Ireland, and Germany. Steam-powered ships took to the seas after 1880, replacing the older, slower sailing ships, which meant it was suddenly much faster and cheaper to cross the ocean, making the dream of a journey to America more accessible to many around the world. Before long, millions of immigrants were arriving on America's shores. They passed through immigration processing stations like Ellis Island in New York and Angel Island in San Francisco Bay. This wave was much more diverse than before. Coming mainly from Southern Europe, it was led by Italians, Poles, Greeks, Swedes, Norwegians, Hungarians, Jews, Lebanese, and Syrians. It was during this 50-year immigration wave, from about 1870 to 1920, when many well-off, white, native-born Americans began to consider mass immigration a danger to the health and security of the country. They started actively organizing to exert political power to slow it down. The first immigration law in American history was known as the Asian Exclusion Act. It was passed in 1875 and, you guessed it, outlawed Asians, specifically Asian contract laborers, from stepping foot on American soil, plus any other people considered convicts in their own countries. In 1921, Congress pushed through a law that marked a turning point in American immigration policy, a law that passed the Senate 78-1. The Emergency Quota Act set strict limits on the amount of immigrants who would be allowed into the country each year. But that drop-off in the flow of persons into America still didn't satisfy the anti-immigration crowd who, just 3 years later in 1924, forced Congress to tighten the quota even more, established the Border Patrol, and stated that any undocumented immigrants who entered the country were subject to deportation. It's during this time that the definition of illegal alien was born, a term that would be used to stigmatize the next group the anti-immigration community's crosshairs became fixed on: Latin American migrants living and working in the U.S. Southwest. After the quota laws passed by the U.S. Congress in the 1920s, immigration was capped for the first time in American history. The U.S. entrance into World War II also meant many more Mexican workers were needed to fill in for all the young American men who were off fighting the Germans in Europe and the Japanese in the Pacific. But large numbers of Mexicans without the necessary paperwork came in search of the American dream too, and what followed is one of the ugliest periods in U.S. immigration history. With pressure mounting to do something about the thousands of immigrants easily crossing the southern border each year, President Eisenhower turned to General Joseph Swing, who launched Operation Wetback in 1954. That derogatory name reveals the insensitivity of the policy, which directed hundreds of federal officials to lead thousands of local police officers on sweeps through neighborhoods throughout the American Southwest, stopping any Mexican-looking person and demanding to see their papers. If they didn't have their papers, they were arrested and deported. Some estimates put the amount of illegal immigrants thrown out of the country above 1 million, leading to countless families being torn apart. In some cases, their American-born children were even sent away. Obviously, this program angered many Mexican-American citizens and anyone else who saw it as a blatant violation of human rights on a massive scale. The final era of immigration to America is the one we're still currently in, which began in 1965 with the passage of the Hart-Celler Act. This law finally replaced the unfair quota system with a policy that gives preference to immigrants who have relatives already in the United States, or people with job skills that are highly sought after. All other past restrictions targeting specific groups were thrown out. This was one of the crown jewels in President Lyndon Johnson's Great Society program, and it fundamentally shifted who was allowed in. In 1970, 60% of immigrants came from Europe. This number just fell off a cliff by the year 2000, when only 15% were from Europe. The United States is home to nearly 20% of all the immigrants in the world, and it's estimated that more than 10 million of those immigrants are here illegally, living in the shadows.
Maine, Ideas. Historically, immigrants were seen as a threat to America. Most of the immigration policies favored immigrants from countries that were rich. As the years passed by, immigrants from different continents were capable of coming to the U.S. Also, the treatment of immigrants improved.
This is an ABC News special report, a presidential address to the nation.
My fellow Americans, tonight I'd like to talk with you about immigration. For more than 200 years, our tradition of welcoming immigrants from around the world has given us a tremendous advantage over other nations. It's kept us youthful, dynamic, and entrepreneurial. It has shaped our character as a people with limitless possibilities. People not trapped by our past, but able to remake ourselves as we choose. But today, our immigration system is broken, and everybody knows it. Business owners who offer their workers good wages and benefits see the competition exploit undocumented immigrants by paying them far less. All of us take offense to anyone who reaps the rewards of living in America without taking on the responsibilities of living in America. And undocumented immigrants who desperately want to embrace those responsibilities see little option but to remain in the shadows or risk their families being torn apart. It's been this way for decades.
Basically, Americans appreciate the diversity of their country. However, the United States immigration system is collapsing as it is not considerate of immigrants' human rights.
Immigrants create far more businesses than native-born Americans over the last 20 years. Immigrants are more fertile, and they love families, and they have more intact families, and they bring a younger population. The one way that we can rebuild the demographic pyramid is to fix a broken immigration system, to allow for people to come, to learn English, to play by our rules, to embrace our values, and to pursue their dreams in our country with a vengeance to create more opportunities for all of us. This is a conservative idea. And if we do this, we will rebuild our country in a way that will allow us to grow. If we don't do it, we will be in decline.
This is an ABC News special report.
32-year-old Armando Ibanez was born and raised in Mexico, but considers Los Angeles home. He crossed the border illegally 14 years ago.
What was life like for you in Mexico?
Seeing your mother struggling to provide food for you, that's one of the sad memories that I have from Mexico.
His mom, along with his brother and sister, snuck into the U.S. a year before Armando. His younger siblings will be allowed to stay temporarily under a special immigration program already in place for children. But President Obama's new immigration plan does not protect Armando or his mother from deportation, since they came to the U.S. as adults.
How am I supposed to come home and tell that she's not going to be part of this? I wish President Obama could come to my house and tell my mom that, because I can.
Martha Aravalo is the executive director of Carecen, a nonprofit that provides education and legal services to 20,000 immigrants each year.
How often are you seeing families split apart?
Every day. Every day people leave their homes and go to work or go to school, with fear that when they come back, their family is not going to be the same.
Armando attends community college part-time while working as a full-time waiter to support his family. He hopes to transfer to a 4-year university, but for now his family faces an uncertain future in the U.S.
Because of the United States' inadequate immigration system, immigrant students like Armando live in fear. Armando is afraid that one day he's going to get deported back to Mexico with his mom.
Joining us now is Akash Patel, a recent graduate of the University of Oklahoma, who has recently started a nonprofit program to help undocumented immigrant students get on the right path. Akash, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start off with your story. Give us a brief synopsis of how you got here today.
Sure. My family and I came to the United States from the UK when I was just 2 years old, from London. That included my sister and both my parents. So we came here on visitor visas, And through some complications and confusion in our process, we accidentally overstayed those visas.
Let's start with your experience with a lot of what we're talking about today, the impact on children and what children are going through. So as a child immigrant to the country, what was your experience like going through that process?
Yeah, the process is very confusing, certainly very frightening as well. Sometimes you don't really know not only how to take advantage of certain opportunities, but what's going to happen to you if someone finds out that you're undocumented, what is going to happen. And so as a kid growing up in schools, I didn't quite know how to broach the topic with my counselors, teachers, if I could tell my friends about it. So I was very hesitant to ask for help, because if I had to ask a counselor how to apply for a scholarship or apply to go to college, then I have to tell them about my status. So it's a very difficult place to be, knowing that you're very frightened, but also knowing that you have to find out somehow how to thrive and contribute anyway.
So why have you become an advocate, and how are you advocating for immigration reform?
Sure. The main thing for me is I sort of, in a sense, made it. I got to go to college. I went to the University of Oklahoma and just graduated. Reflected on that after graduating and throughout my senior year, and realized a lot of kids don't make it that far. And I wanted to just help all the kids who aren't making it this far, and sort of figure out how we can, on a local level, work together to expand opportunities for young people.
What difficulties do you think ESL students face when they first come to the United States?
Well, I think knowing that they are speaking one language that's very different perhaps than their peers, that might make them feel different, and they want a sense of belonging. So sometimes it's very difficult for them. And at the same time, I think as a teacher, one of your jobs is to make sure that they understand that knowing a different language is going to be a huge valuable skill for them at some point. So it's really important to work with students to understand that they have a gift, and that they have to be able to take that and cherish it, and at the same time learn that new language so that they can also feel like they fit in.
Immigrants face many difficulties when they come to the U.S. However, one of the most difficult problems they face is learning English. Because Akash educated himself and worked hard as an immigrant student, he was able to create a program and support other immigrants as they pursue their educational dreams. Therefore, it is very important to never underestimate any immigrant student, because he or she can impact other immigrant students' lives.
Not even my closest friends know. I know that I shouldn't really care about what Facebook comments and YouTube comments say, but I feel very shameful. I'm Mexican, I'm double majoring, I'm gonna graduate magna cum laude. I didn't take out any loans either. I worked since I was 16. I can't hide it for the rest of my life.
Right about 17, 18, that's when I got into Harvard. I received my acceptance letter. I left out the door and I tripped on some cable there. It actually knocked down my computer, but I ran all the way to school to show them, you know, the email that I had just got. And that was the first problem there.
A thing that drives me is when people ask me, so, what's your major? Yeah. Mathematics and statistics. Ooh, good luck with that. That looks confusing, but it's really not. So I went and I asked her, I was like, Mom, do you have my social security number? And she was like, you don't have a social security number. So I was like, wait, what? So how am I in school? And she was like, when I enrolled you in school originally, they didn't ask for a social security number. They just asked for your basic information and your birth certificate. I was like, wow, I don't have a social security number. That means I'm undocumented.
A lot of these kids had no choice about whether they would come here. They found themselves in the United States at the age of 2 or 3. The only country they know is our country.
I came when I was about 5.
They did not take that first step. They did not decide to come to this country.
I missed the stop sign, and there happened to be a cop coming my way when I ran it, and he immediately turned around and stopped me. And that's where everything started. It was weird. I didn't feel myself fitting into the crowd. Me being like in the whole orange jumpsuit thing, and to see my mom just on the other side of that glass, it just hurt for her, like to see her cry and me not be able to hold her and tell her that it was gonna be okay. Like that hurt.
My ancestors have been where Mario is right now. This sense of walking in fear and living in fear.
If you treat these young people who've lived their whole life, except maybe a year or two, in the United States, and you reject them, and you make them go back to a country they don't know, you take them out of a culture that they love and they contribute to through their education, through being in the service. Well, it's a mystery how a Christian who says, I am a Christian, can be so harsh.
What's the great secret in America, huh?
This idea that people are walking around in fear, it just strikes me as un-American. It also strikes me as a problem that we should work to find a solution to.
They've gone to school, they've worked hard, they've gone to college. Kids who've done everything we've asked of them. Let's give them that chance.
This issue really challenges our country to look inside of our hearts. As sad as it is to see the dysfunction around our whole immigration issue, even sadder would be if no one in the rest of the world wanted to come to America.
I am so many things, and if people see me walking, if people were to see, all the things that I've done, they would have never thought that I wasn't documented. I grew up in the United States. 16 years I've been here. I do want to stay.